Welcome everyone, good afternoon or good morning, good evening, depending on where you are in the globe as you join. My name is Bettina Prato. I am the moderator of this event, as well as being the senior coordinator of the Smallholder and Agri-SME Finance and Investment Network, SAFIN. This event on prioritizing climate resilience, building a new policy consensus with smallholder farmers is co-organized by the GAFSP team, as well as the SDG2 Advocacy Hub. The event will consist of two segments. We will have a scene setting segment presenting evidence from two recent reports. First report is the Ceres 2030 report on sustainable solutions to end hunger. And the second is a report that I believe is just about to come out or has just been released from the World Bank and IFPRI on repurposing agricultural policies and support, assessing options to promote sustainable development. After this scene setting part of the event, we will go into a panel discussion with some policymakers, government representatives, as well as representatives of small-scale family farmers that will share their perspectives and those of their constituencies about where the main needs are in terms of investment, as well as policy action for climate resilience agriculture, with reference, among others, to their participation in GAFSP finance programs. For housekeeping, I should tell you that this session is being recorded and will be available on the GAFSP and SDG2 Hub websites afterwards. Also, and this is the reason why I am speaking as slowly as I can, there is interpretation available, so you can listen to the event in French and in English. Finally, if you have comments or questions to pose to the presenters or the panelists as we go through the event, please use the chat function to do that. I will be monitoring the chat and I will be picking up some of the questions or comments to integrate them into the conversation. Now, to kick us off, I'm very pleased to give the floor to Mr. Dirk Schatzschneider, who is the Deputy General of the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany, BMZ, as well as the chair of the GAFSP steering committee. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Bettina, for the warm welcome, and thank you all for joining in, logging in here today at this timely event on the sidelines of the CFS 49. We want to discuss the need for dedicated and targeted financing to boost the climate resilience of smallholder farmers in the context of an overall challenging environment. Our discussion today aims to shed light on the need to scaling up investment in agriculture, particularly in climate resilience. And as you said already, Bettina, we are framing the event with the evidence gathered by Ceres 2030 on the massive financing gap that remains to feed the world. Happy to see Karin Smaller again, who presented at a premiere some months ago her results some months ago here in Berlin, which was a great event. Nice to see you again, Karin. However, we also will discuss the potential role of repurposing the large public support to agriculture. To that end, we will be presenting the findings from a World Bank IFPRI report on repurposing agriculture subsidies. We think that this provides a richer picture of the current discussion regarding the need for increased investment, while also putting on the table the equal need for stronger policies and better spending of funds to benefit a more sustainable model of agriculture. We believe it to be crucial that both policies and investments put the climate resilience of smallholder farmers at the center of their interest. Yet currently, smallholder farmers benefit the least from the agricultural investments worldwide. This needs to change. We as BMZ in Germany will continue to fight against climate change and for an end to global hunger, as illustrated, for example, by the One World No Hunger initiative, which I happen to be chairing at the moment. GAFSP is a key partner for us to achieve SDG2. The program is a financing instrument that offers public and private investment tools along the entire value chain to governments, farmers, and the private sector. But above all, GAFSP is a partnership that engages multiple actors in countries with the most need. And that's a special added value of this useful tool. Currently, I am the chair of the board at GAFSP and work alongside civil society, country representatives, fellow donors, and development agencies to define the strategic direction of the program and to identify the most impactful projects. GAFSP projects are designed and led by governments, the private sector, or producer organizations. GAFSP financing is used at country level to incentivize a dialogue and foster a national consultative process to align GAFSP investments with countries' long-term agricultural strategies. Dear colleagues, definitely we can all agree that smallholder farmers are the most impacted by the effects of climate change. Yet they benefit the least from the agricultural investments worldwide. Therefore, I am delighted that we have around the table not only policymakers, but in particular, smallholder farmer representatives that know about the challenges they face in their countries and are also fully aware of the benefits of working together. Given the context of multiple crises, as I mentioned at the beginning, the need to work together to prevent hunger, protect and restore livelihoods, and ensure food security is more urgent than ever. We all do already quite a bit in this field, but please allow me to urge us all to do even more together for our common future in a world without hunger. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to a fruitful discussion, and I'm happy to be here with you. Over to you again, Bettina. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for this introduction that lays out, so the urgency, the importance of the issues that we're discussing, I think very well. Thank you for that. Now without further ado, we go into our first segment with two presentations. We will start with a presentation from Karin Smaller, who is the Director for Agriculture and Investment at the International Institute for Sustainable Development, IISD, as well as the CARES 2030 initiative. Karin, you have the floor to present the findings from the report, Challenges Ahead on the Financing Gap. Thank you. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Bettina, and thanks to GAFSP and the SDG2 Advocacy Hub for inviting me to speak today and to share these results, and great to see you again, Dirk. I really hope we can help advance this agenda more, particularly around this climate resilience angle. So I want to share some of the findings from the CARES 2030 report that relate to this topic about climate resilience for smallholder farmers. And what I want to try and focus on is our findings where we look at what the most effective ways were to help small-scale producers adopt new technologies and what the investment gap is. Why this focus on small scale producers, and particularly small scale producers in low and middle income countries? And I think beyond the point that Dirk made about this is the population that's receiving the least investment, I think the other reality is this is the population that is living in the most precarious social and economic conditions, unacceptably high levels of poverty and hunger, and the people that are most vulnerable to the negative impacts of climate change. And in many ways, most vulnerable because of this precarious economic and social condition. And as we all know, this has been made so much worse as a result of COVID and the result of the increased frequency of extreme weather-related events. So let me start with the investment gaps, and then I'll look at some of the ways we looked at how this money can be spent. So many people have probably already seen this. But basically what we found using economic modeling was that the investment gap is an additional $33 billion per year for the next 10 years. So $33 billion per year until 2030. Of this total, we found that 14 billion per year must come from donors, and 19 billion per year must come from governments themselves through domestic resource mobilization. Basically, what we're talking here for the donor community is a doubling of current resources that are spent on agriculture and food security. And I think really importantly, our results are confirmed by another study that was done by the FAO and ZEF, where they found that indeed they confirmed what we found, that basically donors need to double their current spending in agriculture and food security. So I think it's important that we have these two studies that agree on the scale of resources needed. I think quite incredibly, because this might look like a large sum of money, but I think in terms of the amounts of money we've been seeing spent in the context of COVID, this is quite modest. And for this modest spending, if we are able to mobilize this additional money, what we can achieve is removing 500 million people from the daily experience of hunger, doubling the incomes and productivity of 545 million small-scale producers on average, and maintaining greenhouse gas emissions to the targets set in the Paris Climate Agreement. And it's really this eradication of hunger and the doubling of the incomes and productivity of small-scale producers that are going to be one of the central pillars to driving more climate resilience. So what are the most effective ways to help small-scale producers? And how does these efforts help build climate resilience? So we grouped the findings from this research project in three broad areas. But I think what's really important here is that if you focused on one area alone, it's going to be insufficient to achieve these goals that we're trying to set. And that really it's the investment in a portfolio of interventions across these three areas where we're going to achieve the best results. So the first area that is central, and it's actually the main area where more investment is needed, is on the farm and directly supporting smallholders. And here we need both more money and better spending of money. The focus must be on helping farmers adopt existing and new technologies and innovations. So there's a lot of innovation and ideas out there already that are not being used. And really what we found is one of the central challenges is the adoption of existing knowledge, know-how innovations. So for example, one of the things we found was that small-scale producers are successfully adopting new technologies, climate resilient technologies, drought-resistant crops, but only when they're accompanied by sufficient training and extension services, particularly for women, and that these crops that they're being adopted must be both affordable for the producers and profitable. There has to be a market where they're able to sell these products, these goods. So I mentioned already that there is a lot of technology already out there, but there's still not enough attention to context, nor to understanding how knowledge is best shared. Our second area of investment that's needed is on helping move food from the farm to market. And this includes things like donor investments in better storage to reduce post-harvest losses, in enabling small and medium enterprises along the value chain to do their jobs better and to provide the services that farmers need. What we found is that donor investments in better storage for cereals and grains is working really well to build resilience by reducing losses after harvest. But there's a lot of other interventions that are also needed and where there isn't enough spending. And that is around improving handling and packaging and reducing harvest losses for more nutritious foods like fruits and vegetables. These investments in infrastructure and storage and in enabling these SMEs to provide services to farmers is a really important link in the resilience chain. And I know, Bettina, that you've been doing a lot of work around this in terms of helping those SMEs access finance so that they can provide better services to smallholders. And then our third area is arguably our most important, and this is about empowering the excluded. Because what we discovered when we looked at all our findings together is that if we want any of these on-farm or value chain investments to work, we need to empower the excluded by ensuring every person's right to an education, a decent livelihood, and a political voice. So there we looked at the role of social protection programs. We looked at the role of farmers' organizations and access to vocational training. And one of the things we found that I found really interesting, and that's irrelevant for this conversation, is we found that membership in farmers' organization is positively correlated with increasing productivity and incomes. But it mostly benefits male farmers. Women farmers are not benefiting from increased participation in farmers' organizations because they're simply not allowed to become members in many cases. And this is because they lack the title to land that's needed to become members of farmers' organizations. And we had this important wake-up call when we looked at everything together. And for me, this is the central pillar to building more climate resilience. And it's actually resilience in general. It's beyond climate resilience. It's how do you build resilience, not only to climate shocks, but to pandemics like COVID or to wars. And this is this minimum access to capital and capital in all its forms. So no matter what intervention we chose or we looked at, they were most effective for the people who'd had some basic access to capital. In other words, not the poorest, those who already had some base. And we looked at capital in all its forms. So it's not just financial capital that's needed, it's social capital, like networks and being members of farmers' organizations. It's human capital, like education and training. It's knowledge capital, innovation, research. It's financial capital, access to credit and insurance. And whilst all these four areas of capital are crucial, we now also know that if we don't protect our natural capital base, future generations will not be able to benefit from all the knowledge and know-how that we have available. So more concretely, just to look a bit, and this is going to be my most detailed slide and my second last one.
Sorry, Karen, can I ask also if you are able to wrap it up in a minute or so?
Sure.
Thank you.
What I'm showing you here is the interventions that we looked at, and the ones in bold are the areas where I think we can build a stronger climate resilience agenda for smallholders. So what this figure shows you is all the different policy instruments that were included in the modeling work where additional spending is needed. And in bold, you have the areas where we need a climate resilient focus. My last slide is, where do we need this spending to take place? So this is a map of priority countries, of the countries that need external resources the most. And as you can see, clearly sub-Saharan Africa is the place where most of the additional resources need to be spent, 2/3 of the additional resources. And I think this is important because currently only half of the external resources that are coming from donors are going to Africa. And we need a much stronger emphasis of additional resources to Africa. You'll now hear from Madhur about where some of these additional resources could come from, because it's very interesting to say we need more, but where are these going to come from? And I'm really looking forward to hearing his views on where this additional resources could come from and how they could be better achieved to achieve our goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, for this very rich presentation. Actually, quite a few of the points that you made, I'd like to also then pick up later, you know, to hear the views of our panelists in the second session, because I think there is a lot to elaborate on there. But thank you so much for this. We now go to the second presentation from Madhur Gautam, who is lead agriculture economist for the agriculture and food global practice at the World Bank, who will present some options to repurpose public expenditure in agriculture to achieve greater resilience based on this recent collaboration between the World Bank and IFPRI. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bettina, and thank you to GAFSP for the invitation to participate and share some of our findings. What I'm going to talk about is looking at how do we actually achieve, as Karen said, what are some of the options for mobilizing the resources to achieve the transformation of the food system that's needed. By now, it is clear that our food system needs to be transformed from being one that is, if I can get my slides to move, one that is not fit for purpose, and this has been discussed in many studies. I won't go into the detail in terms of the costs of the current, hidden costs of the current food system, to one that is more resilient, sustainable, and healthier. An idea here is to start leveraging available resources in addition to bringing new resources. As Dirk and Karen have said, it's not just a matter of more, but also it's a matter of better, because if nothing else, it makes the case for providing more. So the core, when you're looking at leveraging and achieving the food system transformation, what's required is a systemic shift. A lot of things need to be done, as Karen has so nicely set out a large number of investment opportunities and policy shifts. One core question is, do the current incentives, do the current policies provide the incentives to the producers and to the actors in the value chain to drive such a systemic shift? Because this is, at one level, this requires transformation, requires system-wide change. In some people doing it in one place or others doing it at the other through individual technologies may or may not achieve that. Of course, everything is needed, but the focus here is on looking at how do you alter the incentives. First is to assess whether the incentives are giving. If we are providing the right incentives to achieve that change, or how it might need to change. And here we did some research, and over time it looks like it's clear that the food system has done extremely well in terms of producing more food, and a lot of this has been driven by productivity growth. Agricultural land's contribution has been relatively small, but even so, about 350 million hectares have come into production over the last 40, 50 years. And that has put agriculture squarely as number one in terms of driving deforestation and biodiversity loss, which itself entails billions of dollars of losses in hidden costs. We have done well so far, but I think we're facing headwinds in the sense that growth, at least since 2010, has been slowing, while volatility has been rising. And as we know from FAO's data, hunger and malnutrition are on the rise. So clearly more food is needed, and it also needs to get to the people where it's needed most. On the other hand, while we need more food, we also know that agriculture is very vulnerable to climate change. And here, this slide is a very good depiction of what Karen was talking about in terms of looking at the impact of climate change on productivity growth. New research from Ortiz Gorbea and colleagues is showing, was just published in Nature Climate Change, shows that climate change has already compromised productivity growth by about 21% worldwide. And if you look at Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, and the tropical, also in parts of the Caribbean and East Asia, the losses are as high as 40%. So clearly we face a problem. And the graph on the right is even more scary because that change, that negative impact is accelerating. It's a question of time when climate change will overtake productivity. So when it comes to the question of, coming back to the question of incentives, question is, how much do we actually currently spend on agriculture? And across 79 countries, our data shows that about $640 billion is currently spent by governments on supporting agriculture. Of this 640 billion, 431 goes to producer support, of which 86%, as estimated by OECD, is directed towards what they call most distortive forms of policies and support. A lot of this, it varies across countries quite a bit, but the point is that there's a substantial amount of resources that we could be repurposing towards delivering better incentives and driving the system towards better outcomes. So here now, very briefly, I'll summarize some of the key messages coming out of the study that Roland and GAFSP have done. The study is about to be completed and will be released imminently. At the moment, it's being edited. It will be done soon. So the priority is raise production to meet the growing demand for while improving access to healthier foods and to do it more sustainably, the so-called triple wins that we call. The first message that comes out is the efficiency, the value for money for current domestic support is extremely low, in the sense that the world currently spends about 79 countries, and if you expand that to a little bit more, you know that this is an underestimate, but $219 billion is creating only a value of about 32 billion. That's 7:1 ratio. So transfer efficiency is extremely low. So clearly we need to spend better. And the question is, how can we do that? And one traditional recommendation that economists have given is to abolish the support because it's inefficient. But we know that now the results show that that is politically naive, in the sense that while the abolishing support will raise national income through better economic efficiency and it lowers emissions, but it also lowers output and raises the prices of healthier foods. So this, and considering that food security is one of the top concerns of policymakers, this becomes—
Madhur, sorry, I'm interrupting. I know I'm rude. I'm interrupting because I'm told that the interpreters are finding it difficult to follow. I'm not sure maybe whether it's because you're not wearing a headset. If you have it readily available, maybe you could try, or maybe you can just try speaking a little bit slower, and maybe that will make it easier. Sorry for interrupting. I know that it's disruptive, but I've received this message just so that everybody's able to follow. Thank you.
I'll try to do that, but I'm also mindful of the time, but I will try to go slower. Okay, so the traditional recommendation is to abolish support. And that itself appears to be, and the results suggest that may be a little naive politically, because it entails some important trade-offs, in the sense that you achieve higher national income and lower emissions, but you also lower output and raise the prices of healthier foods. So that affects both food security, raises food security, as well as nutrition concerns. So we try about 4 or 5 different options, and on the right-hand side, we show the outcomes of about 3 of them, which I think represent most of the broad classes of support and options that we considered. One is, delivering current subsidies or current support in a different way, which is targeting more carbon emissions efficient crops without changing any technology with current technology. The second is putting environmental conditionality just using current technology. And the third one is to repurpose towards development, dissemination, adoption along the lines that Karen has just identified and laid out. But targeting agricultural productivity growth towards practices that reduce emissions, technologies and practices that reduce emissions while increasing productivity at the same time. And it turns out that the abolition and environmental conditions have trade-offs as listed, in the sense that it will affect, it lowers your real national income. It also lowers your production output, at least environmental conditionality does, while the reorienting it towards carbon efficient crops leaves it about the same. But it also raises poverty, because as output falls, prices rise, and that has a negative impact on the poor. Now, if you turn towards looking at producing more from a given set of resources, or in other words, using less resources, which is productivity growth, then you have a big win on all three counts of food security, poverty, and economy, in the sense that you gain $1.4 trillion in national income. You increase about 14% of your production, and you reduce poverty by an additional 1% going forward. By just reorienting your policies. The question now is, what happens to the other three key issues that we're concerned about, which is nutrition, climate, and nature. And we look at the impacts on nutrition. Again, repurposing delivers much greater impact in terms of lowering of healthy food costs, while in the environmental conditionality, which has a little bit of a shock on the negative side of output, raises also the prices of healthier foods. On climate, the raising productivity reduces GHG emissions by 40%. That's 2.8 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent. That's the only option that basically delivers a quantum shift in terms of our gains of climate change. And the last one is the big win for nature, in the sense that by increasing production, you require less land. Now, when you require less land, we estimate that at least these simulations, we would save about 105 million hectares. This would be all of 56 million hectares that would need to come into production over the next 20 years, plus an additional about 50 or 48 million hectares that reduces current land in production. This would lead to huge gains in biodiversity and other ecosystem services. One finding, one insight that comes from the model is, and this deals with the issue of livelihoods, is that if in places and in economies where the labor markets are not functioning as well as they should due to various rigidities, they could see, because of the large increase in production, reduced demand for labor needs to move out of into other livelihoods. And if there are impediments to that, you may see a decline in real farm wages, and that will reduce the welfare, incomes and welfare of poor agricultural workers. So the priority here is, in addition to focusing on production and productivity, one also has to pay attention to investment in human capital and skills to facilitate movement of labor out of agriculture. Now, at the World Bank, just a quick couple of slides on where we are and how we are supporting this program. We have a technical assistance program to help countries identify what options are for repurposing their agriculture policies. At the end of the day, policies are country specific, so the solutions will have to be at the individual country level. The global model is useful in providing some insights on options, but the action needs to take place at the country level. To do this, we are operating both at a global level, where we have global roundtables. We've been working with the UK government, the presidency for COP26 to hold a series of ministerial roundtables to raise global awareness, and we have developed a policy action agenda on what the governments may want to, a guide for the governments on how to go about doing repurposing. And we also engaged in a number of other events to try and raise the profile of and the need for repurposing. The big intervention is actually at the country level, where we are working with individual countries to provide them technical assistance to support towards achieving resilient agri-food systems along the lines that we have discussed of achieving achieving the triple wins. And here we are supporting countries, countries that are interested in looking at providing some technical support for upstream analytical review of the current policy frameworks and evaluate the options and trade-offs, identify feasible options for reform through dialogue and consultations, provide capacity building where there is demand for policy monitoring, and then move to operationalization. We just don't want to leave it at identifying options, but we are willing to work with the governments through our own support at the World Bank, plus also mobilizing additional support to move to implementation of the identified preferred options. Right now, we have strong demand for this. We're working in about 13 countries already, but there are a number of countries that have expressed interest, and we hope to increase our support to them going forward. And with that, I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madhur. Lots of exciting work underway. Again, sort of my apologies. I know that this was not easy to follow for the interpreters. So, sort of we'll try to make sure that we pace ourselves for the remaining part. But the video of this session will be available, as I said, afterwards, so you can go back and watch it as well. So we have to close this initial part of the event now because we're a little bit over time. But if there are questions for the two presenters, we will also try to weave them in, so they will stay with us, hopefully. We go now into the panel, and the panel includes 5 people. So we have Dr. Patrick Kormawa, advisor to the Minister of Agriculture of Sierra Leone. We have Mr. Shamsul Alom, additional director of the Department of Agricultural Extension in the Ministry of Agriculture of Bangladesh. We have Mr. Musa Sow, vice president of the Network of Peasant Organizations and Agricultural Producers in West Africa, otherwise known actually as Réseau des organisations paysannes et des producteurs de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, ROPPA. We have Ms. Chintanapon Kiovicit, otherwise known as NOI, coordinator of the Lao Farmer Network. And finally, we have Ms. Constance Okeke, project manager for public finance of agriculture at ActionAid International. So in this panel, we are going to be looking at different perspectives around the importance to invest more in agriculture, specifically for climate resilience, in food systems and in livelihoods. And then what role policies and government spending have in this context, and how international development assistance, or ODA, can help catalyze the right kinds of investments, including through the kind of partnership structures that GAFSP, for example, models or embodies. So I will start with Dr. Patrick Kormawa, advisor to the Minister of Agriculture of Sierra Leone. Thank you, sir, for being with us today. My question to you to kick us off is on what are the priority needs and also the opportunities to make agriculture and the livelihoods of small family farmers more resilient to climate change in your country, Sierra Leone. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Bettina, and thanks to the organizers of this very important forum for Sierra Leone to present its case. First of all, we've been participating in the COP technical discussions. The minister would have loved to be with you, but unfortunately at last minute he is not here. Sierra Leone, like most West African countries, are classified as fragile states. And when fragility at the national level is the norm, that transcends down to the smallholder farmers. So specifically, we are constrained with droughts, floods, and we have huge infrastructural constraints. Access to agricultural inputs as a major constraint we have, and returns on agricultural products, which means what farmers get after investing 6 months or 3 months in agriculture is very, very low, which is making agriculture very unattractive, and which is also putting farmers to toil with or to work against the norms of climate change. That means cutting down trees to have access to energy. So these are combined problems which smallholders are facing in Sierra Leone. And we are also constrained with, as a government, to address what we refer to as a triple burden, which is the youth unemployment, high level of poverty, and food insecurity. When you have all 3 of these combining on a nation, and we have more than 95% of the those farmers that are consistently that we are trying to support, then it's a major problem at the macroeconomic level. Farmers are degrading the natural forests, they practice slash and burn, and our problem has been to get the right incentives to get youths to farming. And those that are conversant with the Africa of rural areas in Africa, the youths have moved off from rural areas because agriculture is no longer very attractive. So for us to bring back young people to farming, we are repurposing or repositioning the policy in Sierra Leone. And that means basically the government was the largest investor in agriculture. So about 2 years ago, and I want to salute the presentation made by Karen, because the 3 areas are areas that we are looking at. That is, 1, how do we increase agricultural productivity with crowding in the private sector? How do we ensure that the market value of agricultural products are increased? And how, within doing this, how do we mitigate the negative effects of climate change? So that is what we are doing, or that's what the government is doing, what we refer to as a policy shift. And it has 3.
Can I stop you there for just a second, because I want to come back to you to hear a little bit more in detail about what the government is doing. Okay. So please hold that thought. Okay. I wanted to come to Musa Sow from ROPPA and ask you, does this sort of picture of, so the challenges related to climate and how they intersect with market and economic challenges resonates with you as well, with your constituency over, in general, over the region?
Thank you very much, Bettina. My full name is Musa F. Sow. I'm a Gambian. I'm the 2nd Vice President of ROPPA in the Network of Farmers in West Africa. Basically, just like Patrick mentioned, the farmers are really faced with unpredictable rainfall, droughts, for the fact that poor infrastructure is very, very key that they are faced with, erosions, deforestation, salinization, and so on. But basically, looking at investment to scale up these areas, first of all, there is need to invest in human capital. Human capital is very, very central to invest in human capital, because the climate change is real, and then we must see how the human capital is improved. Secondly, we need to look at research. There's no way that we can withstand the pressure, the condition, the challenges of climate change if investments are not focused on research and extension. Dissemination of information from the research to the extension to the farmer. The ratio needs to be critically looked at. There need to be policies, extension policies that would help and close these gaps. This information from research reaches the farmer, but the ratio is in such a way that it's not possible. Like 1 farmer to 2,500, 1 extension to 2,500 farmers it's definitely not possible for one extensionist to look after, share the right information with 2,500 farmers as we speak in Africa. And secondly is that there is population increase, and the land size is not increasing. We need to see how we can invest in productivity and not production. We need to see how we improve the soil facility and have the right seeds.
Sorry, I need to interrupt you as well again, because the interpreters, I'm really sorry to do this, but the interpreters are asking, do you have a headset that you can wear? Because it's difficult for that. Okay, so if you don't mind doing that, okay. Try with that and see if maybe you can come across clearer so that the interpreters can also do their job.
I do that.
Apologies for disrupting the flow, but I think we really want to all hear what you have to say. So I did pick up on, I did manage to hear you, I think mostly quite well. You also underlined the importance of investments in infrastructure, human capital, extension systems, as well as research. So kind of mapping also over the priority areas that were also picked up by previous speakers. Are you connected now? Can you continue?
Yeah, can you find out if they can hear me?
Yeah, can the interpreters hear better now? I am assuming so until I get told otherwise. So please proceed, Musa.
Yeah, just to connect on when I said human capital, investment. When I talked about research and extension, if after having all that, there is need to look at the infrastructure for post-harvest management and handling, which is very, very key. The reports that 30% of what is produced at the end of production is lost as a result of poor post-harvest management and handling. And the fourth one would be, after having to have logistics and post-harvest management, there's also need critically to see how you can develop the farmers to have that business set. Entrepreneurship is very key and value addition. Basically, those are areas I think are very, very critical. Once they are, when investment is focused on them, we will be able to reduce poverty and hunger significantly. And thank you very much. And over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for this. It's very clear. It's really striking how challenges related to climate resilience and challenges related to the economic and social resilience of agriculture and of farmers are really closely intertwined. So one cannot be addressed without the other. Let me come also to Mr. Shamsul Alam from the Ministry of Agriculture of Bangladesh, and to ask you, sir, sort of to add complement to this picture of what the main areas of need, but also the main opportunities for action to support the climate resilience of farmers in your country, sir.
Thanks, Bettina. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. First, I give thanks to the authority to select me as a panel discussion. Bangladesh is a disaster-prone country and one of the most vulnerable country among the 10 most vulnerable countries. We are very glad to inform you that Bangladesh first established Climate Change Trust Fund by its own money and already spent more than $450 million. Bangladesh is spending 1% of its GDP to overcome climate-related loss. We are very happy that our Honorable Prime Minister achieved the United Nations Top Environmental Medal Champion of the Earth. Bangladesh government has endorsed plenty of policies for climate change strategies and adaptation. Of these policies, Perspective Plan 2041 and Bangladesh Delta Plan 2100 are two significant policy instruments for medium and long-term strategies of developing a climate resilient society. To complement these policies, Government, with the assistance of development partners, investment largely on developing the climate resilient infrastructure to shift from traditional agriculture onto more productive, demand-driven, business-oriented, farmer-centric, and climate-resilient, low-emission food system all need more investment. Though Bangladesh invested more on infrastructure, there is still enough scope to invest in agriculture. Now, Global Agriculture Food Security Program, that is GAFSP, funded Integrated Agricultural Productive Project, that is IAPP, implemented between 2011 to 2016, was a flagship climate smart project in Bangladesh. The project was implemented in two environmentally vulnerable areas of Bangladesh, namely Rangpur, which is drought-prone area, and Borishal, which is saline-prone area. 250,000 farmers were served under this project of $50 million US, given as grant in line with country investment plan, that is CIP 2011, supervised by FAO and World Bank. Building on the success of IAPP, a new missing middle initiative, that is MMI, a pilot project was approved by GAFSP to promote farmers' organization emerged from IAPP and others. MMI's holistic effort is to ensure smallholders access to rural resources, services, and market. FAO has provided a handful training on financial literacy, digital literacy, and business literacy. MMI project has been working in two climatic hotspots. One in northern region of Bangladesh, which is susceptible to drought and flash flood, and another in southern region exposed to tidal surge and salinity. MMI facilitated smallholder farmers on climate smart farming and adaptation of appropriate technologies. And also MMI supported COOPs, that is cooperatives, have adopted a variety of profitable cropping patterns such as chili, fallow, almond paddy in saline-prone area, maize, jute, paddy in flash-flood and drought-prone area, potato, maize, paddy in drought-prone area, mung bean or groundnut, fallow vegetables in tidal surge area. That is, there are 4 cropping patterns and which was established in different area. In order to make these cropping patterns competitive, the projects and COOP jointly invested in on-farm small-scale facility centers with agricultural machines, vans, and storage. MMI has been facilitating producers of these COOPs to implement good agricultural practice, as well as linking them with private input companies, Bangladesh Agriculture Development Corporation, that is BADC, retail shops, exporters, and processors. Moreover, the producer organizations developed their own business plan using Rural Invest Toolkit that helps communities and investors make investment decisions for these appropriate cropping patterns. Now, I will tell you the beauty of financing these climate resilient cropping patterns. The MMI has supported the producer organizations and their apex to become smallholder financial institutions, meeting their members' finance needs. They use a holistic approach of considering all aspects of the process together, from business proposal, development to implementation to accounting. This empowers producer organization to successfully manage funds. Further, as smallholders face considerable difficulties accessing credit from external resources to fund their activities, MMI helped to establish a revolving loan fund, that is RLF, mechanism within each producer organization. This producer organization led revolving loan funds.
I'm going to interrupt you rudely to ask you if you could just wrap up so we can also move to the other panelists. I will allow you to continue and wrapping it up later, but do you have a point that you can close in the next just few seconds?
So Can I I have a little bit, so can I only 1 or 2 minutes?
Is it specifically about the financing mechanism and how this program allows channeling through farmers organizations to smallholder farmers? Because if that is the case, then I can come back to you. I can come back to you in the next round. Is that okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay,
Apologies for I imagine I'm coming across as a pretty rude moderator today, but it's part of my job, because I just wanted to have a little bit of a round of sense of sort of where the challenges and opportunities are, and I've picked a number of points about opportunities, particularly from your statement about Bangladesh, that I think are very inspiring. So Noi Kevovic from the Lao Farmer Network. What does the situation look like in terms of the constituency in your network in your country, in terms of the priorities, the main areas of opportunity for policy action and investment, to face the impact of climate change on farmers in your country?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me on this webinar. And I'm from Lao Farmer Network. We have 4,000 farmer members from 14 provinces across Laos. 80% of them produce cash crop, 10% raise livestock, and some of them produce coffee and tea and collect non-timber forest product. And our farmers are facing some of the climate change also. And I'm also agree with all of the panelists that are presented before. And I want to add some of the information from our farmer to you here, like for the challenges of the farmers and that they are facing and how they are adapting. First, I would like to talk about the global warming. As you may know, everybody know now is the weather is get worse than before a lot, and the one who are affected a lot is the farmer who are practicing the agriculture in the farm. So it is very difficult for them when the weather is get higher and they cannot grow their vegetable. That's affect to their income also, because they have a low yield and to get a less income. But some of the farmers, they are trying to survive. They try to survive by adapting like integrated farming. Some like when they plant and is have a hot weather, they will from the Thongmang organic vegetable group, they could adapt by planting tree alternately, such as the mango tree, jackfruit tree in there, and the vegetable garden to provide shade and reduce heat for vegetable plot. And they also can get benefit from that. Like if you grow a fruit tree, when you have a fruit, the farmer can also sell it to the market and can generate more income for that group. And the second issue like we are facing is because of the climate change. People will know like it will have the many disease and plague outbreak in many areas of Laos. And for instance, I can share like our farmer plant, and they plant the chili and eggplant. They grow well until the harvest stage, but this crop are infected with the virus and spread is very quickly, and all of the product were damaged, and farmer could not solve this problem permanently. They try to use the biopesticide and to kill this pest, and some of them work, but some is not work for them. So and the other area, like such as the maize plantation in the north of Laos, they are facing the fall armyworm. Is very seriously in the 2 years ago in Laos, and is across from the other country from Africa, America, and come to Laos because of there are no border, to so the fall armyworm happened in Laos also, and because of the pesticide use is one of the causes that increase the pest outbreak. So we introduced So we introduced the farmer how to prevent and solve this problem also by trying the integrated pest management approach as much as we can. And but I know because of the farmers, some of them, they want to use the chemical because it's easy for them, something like that. And but we try to introduce them to use the IPM. And you know, last 2 years in Laos, we also faced the impact of frosts on coffee in the northern of Laos, and which was the second time in the 5 years that the coffee farmer made this problem. Many coffee trees die, and they are quite sad because they lose their income, because on that time coffee tree they produce a lot of fruit, but because of the frost come, so they cannot correct it. And but from that experience, the farmer they have learned from that and adapt by planting. They plant the new, because of the one that dry, they cut it, and you have to destroy, because of if you still keep it, it will be affect to the other tree nearby also. So they learn from that. So they plant a new coffee tree under the big tree that provide a shade, some about 70%. So currently the farmer, they can solve that problem, and now they don't have that problem. And the last issue that challenge is the water resources is very significant issue for the farmer. Unseasonal rain and droughts in Laos, and farmer lack of water for their rice cultivation. So irrigation scheme are needed for them, and there are some big irrigation stream in some area, but the farmer could not access because they could not afford the high electricity costs. It is quite expensive for them, and some irrigation has not enough water to fill the system also, because of the dry season everywhere, no water, and it's challenges for the rice farmer to increase their yield on. This is their challenges, and how they adapt. Some of them they can adapt, but some is too difficult for them to solve also. So it needs like a collaboration with other stakeholders, like institution, research institution also to help, and development partner, that you have like something like the smart farmer you can introduce to the Lao farmer also, and they can try to apply it into their farm to increase their income and the yield also. Yes.
Thank you. I really love it that you reminded us of the complexity of the ways in which climate is impacting on the lives of farmers. You know, we think about droughts, we think about floods, you know, we think about changes in temperature, but it's much more than that. You know, you referred, for example, to changes in the ways in which pests manifest themselves, you know, sort of plant diseases, but also animal diseases. So there's a really broad range of issues that need to be addressed. And thank you also for reminding us that farmers all over the world are already very much in the business of trying to adapt, sometimes in really creative ways, to the best of their possibilities. Constance Okeke from ActionAid, I know, thank you for patiently waiting. As the last panelist, I will then go back also to Musa, Patrick, Dr. Komawa, as well as Mr. Shamsul Alam to hear a little bit more about the policy efforts underway and priorities. But what I wanted to ask you, Constance, specifically is the following. As I understand, you work quite a lot with women farmers. So I wanted to understand, you know, the conversation until now has been, let's call it sort of gender neutral, maybe. We haven't actually looked at whether there are differentiated needs, opportunities, challenges that are faced by women farmers, or by women in the context of the small family farm community. And I was wondering from your work, whether you have points that you would like to share with us in terms of that particular very big sort of issue, that very large constituency in the agriculture sector. Please, Constance, thank you. I do not believe your microphone is open. Is it the issue that you cannot hear, or is it that you cannot speak? Can you nod if you can hear me? Okay, everybody, just a moment of patience. We see if we're able to fix this, otherwise I'll come back to Musa F. So.
Go ahead. Okay.
Yes,
can you hear
indeed.
Me now?
Please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm not sure I heard the very last part of your question, but if I'm on the right track, you want to know how women are affected differently in terms of the climate issue and what can be done to support them. I'm happy that most of the first speakers that spoke, like Musa Sowe and Noi, have also touched on some of the issues affecting smallholder farmers in general in terms of the climate issue. But specifically in terms of issues of women who are part of the, or who are the majority of who I work with, and most of them are behind me here, we are actually part of this event, is that issues like access to land, affect women differently. So like some of the feedback we are getting from the farmers are that normally they don't inherit land, they don't own land. So with the issues of climate change hampering on their production, it makes it even more difficult for them to produce. So take for instance, when a woman farmer has to get land that is far away from the home, and with the flooding and the rain issues, they are not able to access these farms because the roads are not good. So they end up not being able to have a return on their investments. And at times, given some of the security issues happening around Africa, for instance, in Nigeria, where you have issues of kidnap, issues of banditry, grazing route conflicts, the farmers are left in a quagmire because they can't even access this land, irrespective of the climate change issue. Then again, you come to some of the opportunities that are abound in terms of supporting farmers to adapt to climate change, like issues of water irrigation. The farmers are saying that we don't have resources to get this equipment. So governments do not consider us when they are providing technology. So why can't we have friendly technology that can help us harvest water within our farms so that we're able to produce round the year, even if the rain is not coming when it's supposed to come? And we can also trap this water that is excess that leads to flooding. So they're talking about having small motorized boreholes, small dams, supporting them to doing earth dams and ponds within their farms. And then again, they also complain about, like I know the fish producers were saying something about government giving support within this period of drought, rather flood. Only a few percentage of women were able to benefit from this because it's a cluster that is male dominated. A lot of women do not have the resources to go into fish production because they don't have the resources. And then again, because they do not have enough access and control over land, some of them lease. And because the climate patterns are not predictable, they do not have timely information about the weather pattern, they invest in leasing the land, which has a timeline. And they're also supposed to pay for this land. So they pay for land that they're not able to use premiumly. So at the end of the day, it's, make them fall short of, their investment. So there are so many ways that the women farmers can be supported, to benefit premiumly in climate adapting strategies. And then again, you talk about credit. Most of the time, the credit that are available or the financing that is available are always readily available to the men or to larger farmers. The smallholder farmers are not even able to have all the necessary requirements that they need to access some of these grants. So some of the things they're saying is, how can government provide friendly credit and grants to help smallholder farmers, cultivate year round, even if they're having climate issues. And then one other thing that they brought up is that the climate change has exacerbated the issue of land grabs, because now they are left at home. They don't know what to do because they are waiting for the rains. They've tried to manage to prepare the land as much as they can, but they are left in the quagmire because multinationals come in and say we are coming with smart agriculture, high technology agriculture. They get all the support from government, grab their land, and then turn them into outgrowers. So at the end of the day, they are left, for nothing. So there should be that conscious and deliberate funding of agroecology, because like we discussed before this event, they gave me a lot of adaptation strategies. And when you interrogate these adaptation strategies, they're all agroecology practices, like they are mulching using leguminous crops, like they are spot burning, like using lime to prepare their land before they produce because of the over degradation of land, like they are mixed cropping, intercropping practices, small water harvesting management that they practice. Government is not funding these things. Government is not consciously funding these practices. They keep, funding things that are not taking into cognizance the needs of the smallholders. And the women are saying the only way you will fund and fund responsibly is that you listen to us, you consult us, and involve us in the processes of financing of agriculture, which is about budget processes, allocation of your budget to ensure that issues of agroecology, smallholder women farmers are integrated in the financing. We can talk all about all the beautiful plans to mitigate climate issues or to meet up our SDG goals. We cannot achieve that if the women are not put at the forefront. If the financing is not channeled to the right people. The women are here. It's not me saying it. I'm repeating what they've just told me. These are lived experiences. These are lived issues. They borrow money, they rent land. At the end of the day, they are paying for land that they have not used because nobody is taking into cognizance their cries. So I think it's time we all pay more attention to action than to rhetoric. You have the GAFSP supporting smallholders, and we give more smallholders so that they can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I can hear the clapping behind you, and I think many others are actually thanking you for your testimony, for your voice. Thank you. Musa, are you still with us? Because I'd like to just very briefly come back to you for like a minute or so to ask. Constance has already sort of, answered the question that I also wanted to pose, which is, what is your priority agenda for policy? Do you see any examples of success, or promising policy interventions, maybe development investments that are supporting the agenda that you laid out today, that you laid out earlier? Or do you want to add to Constance's words in terms of where is not enough attention yet going, either on policy or in terms of the work of development finance providers? 1 minute for you.
Thank you very much. I hope I am very clear over there. First of all, just to add on to what Constance have just mentioned, with regards to inputs and also land, there is need to have policies that will support access to finance. Because without finance, there is nothing that the farmer would be able to do. Finance is very, very critical when it comes to that. And secondly, there is also need to see how they can also have access to simple techniques, simple technologies and skills that they can also use, and in terms of having to improve their production and productivity. It all boils around the policies. One, the policies are incoherent; they're not speaking to each other. Two, there is less enforcement on policies. Three, there is a challenge of human resources when it comes to government responding to what farmers need. I think these are critical areas where, and the fourth one is the political commitment of having to make sure that women have access to land, because the tenure right is so sensitive that the political leaders' political commitment is very, very less, because they think that that's a no-go area. for women to be given that opportunity to have access to land. And I think it's also important to see how policies are also revived to reduce the dependency on rain-fed agriculture. We need to look at the surface water, be it on irrigation or whatever, but we can't look up anymore. You see, I keep on telling people, as long as farmers continue sell raw materials, they will continue to be poorer and poorer and poorer. As long as the raw material is being sold at farm gate prices, we will continue to be poorer and poorer. The bottom line of the whole thing is governments need to see how to prioritize to add value on what is being produced by farmers to be able to compete in the international market. As long as we continue to sell raw materials, we will continue to be poorer and poorer, and there will be no limits. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a loud and clear, and I think a very, very valid point. Patrick, Dr. Kormawa, I'm sorry, I know I cut you short first, but I'd like to come back to you. We've heard quite a number of perspectives on the needs, etc. I know, you were just about to introduce what the government in Sierra Leone has been doing in terms of the repurposing agenda, but also in terms of specific policies and investments to support farmers' resilience. Would you like to share what is in place, what your plans are?
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me just start off from where Mr. Sao or Musas just ended. We realize that the farmers are even becoming more impoverished. And when farmers are impoverished, the next thing they have is a natural resource which they degenerate. They cut forest, and of course, to have access to energy. So what we did was to have a very serious discussion with farmers to see where should government intervene in order to improve on their productivity. Before them, government was the sole provider of all agricultural inputs and services. So we as a government went ahead to develop a policy where the government moved out of the supply of agricultural inputs and services, and basically to encourage the domestic private sector. And this is very important for me to underline. The private sector in most African countries are very, very weak. So government has to support the existing private sector to be able to have a feet on the ground to support farmers. So government bought agricultural machines, more than 200, and distributed in all 16 districts of the country, of course, through a competitive bidding process, and we were able to select the private sector participants. Second was the smart policy, smart incentives. It costs government about $100 to ensure that each farmer have at least access to 2 bags of fertilizer. But that money is given through a voucher to the farmers, and they only pay when the services are provided. The third was, and very important also, that government was able to make some savings. And through that savings, they set up a 50 million bank guarantee through the central bank so that private sector can go back to the banks to get a 5% interest loan if they needed to buy more equipment to supply, to service those farmers. Now, extension is a problem because of the large number of farmers that we have, and we are not able to have men and women on the ground. We have introduced what we call digital extension services. And this is work in progress. So in summary, we need to use technology. Technology is important, finance is important, but technology, I think, will be a game changer in the modern day agriculture. Why am I saying this? The young people of today are not willing to be on the farm if they are going to use machetes. The young women are not going to the farm if they are going to use the mortar and pestle. The women are not going to the farm if they are going to use the hoe. And I see a lot of women sitting down here. One of the biggest problems women have is that they have to weed with the hand. That is backbreaking. They have to process their products with manual labor. That is not going to work. So the intersect between technology, knowledge, and of course, partnerships, I think are what we need to bring to the fore. And if I have to make a last statement, is the nexus which I saw in the presentation by Karen and Madhu's presentation. Irrigation is key. If we have to increase productivity using less land and increasing the profitability of agriculture. Because if a farmer has access to half an hectare of land, but with good management practices, they will not interfere with the forest, with the other areas that we contribute to high green gas emission. So with the 2 hectares or with 1 hectare of land that is irrigated, that is well managed, that is human capacity development, that they can produce 2 or 3 crops of land, we will be able to have sufficient food, diversified food, while at the same time increasing the income of the farmers, that they can also participate in other markets.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I love it how the agenda for action and also the different components of what is already in place are forming a very clear mosaic in this discussion. I give the last words
please,
in.
if I could just mention, we were able to do this because the GAFSP has laid the foundation. They had organized farmers in the farmer-based organizations. They have set up what they call the agricultural business centers. Farmers have already been trained. So when we did the analysis, we already have a group of people we can start working with. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. To close the panel, the last minutes, I go back to Mr. Shamsul Alam from Bangladesh. You were going to add some of the key components of this program that you were describing. Would you like to wrap that up in the next 1 minute or so, sir? Thank you.
Thank you. Just I want to say that our main constraint is climate change issues. You know that. To address this, we need financial investment and required technologies. It will be very effective if we can utilize the smallholder farmers in mainstream. Now, personally, I want to say that I am an extension worker actually, and now I have been working in plant quarantine wing and dealing with plant product exportation. From my experience, I have seen that the smallholder farmers have no voice to sell their products in actual price. And these farmers cannot think about the exportation. But last year, I have seen that through MMI, the exporters and these farmers know each other. And these farmers now export their products like potato, mango, vegetables, and which will be continued in future. So it is a great achievement of GAFSP or MMI. Finally, just I want to provide a good information to you. In second project steering committee meeting of MMI, the Ministry of Agriculture agreed to mainstream MMI approach of building strong producer organizations across the country to promote inclusive finance among the smallholder farmers. It is our government decision. So it is a good information to you. Thank you.
Thank you, wonderful. Thank you so much to all the panelists also for being really good on time, all considered, and for your very important perspective testimonies, but also most importantly for your work, because the real work each one of you does outside the context of webinars and online events, and it's for that I think we need to be particularly grateful and honor what you do. Thank you. We just close now in the next 2-3 minutes, as I know that then the interpreters will disconnect. So we have 2 colleagues that are going to offer closing remarks in sequence. First is Ms. Asma Latif from the SDG2 Hub Advocacy. And then we go to Catherine Holyfield, who is a current program manager for GAFSP. So we start with you, Asma. 1 minute or so, or 1-2 minutes maximum. Thank you.
Thank you very much. From the SDG2 Advocacy Hub's perspective, this has been an absolutely fantastic, very rich discussion with new evidence, as well as the rich experience from policymakers as well as smallholder farmers. So thank you so much for that. At the Hub, we've been exploring whether it is indeed time to build a new consensus for smallholder farmers, taking stock of what's coming out of the UNFSS and CFS 49 leading into COP 26, and really understanding and making sure that smallholder farmers are at the center of all the new commitments and policies that are put into place. So as I listened to these really thoughtful interventions, 3 issues came to my mind that should inform this new policy consensus. One is that we need to leverage all resources, existing and new resources, to address the multiple and interconnected challenges that smallholder farmers face. With 8 years left to achieve the SDGs, we really can't leave any money on the table. And we need to address the triple burden that Patrick mentioned, the food insecurity, malnutrition, and the climate challenges. The second is we need to align incentives to address these issues. And the third is we need to support farmers, especially women farmers, address the risks that they face in light of climate change. So there's a lot more. This was such a rich discussion. It was really hard to summarize, but those are my main takeaways for as we think about a new policy consensus for smallholder farmers. Thank you all so much for your interventions today.
Thank you, Asma. It was, I think, you captured in a really effective way some of the key elements of this new consensus that is needed to move the agenda forward. We now go to Catherine Holyfield, Program Manager for GAFSP. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you very great. Thank you so much, Bettina. And let me add my huge word of thanks for all of the panelists and speakers today. I wanted to share that from the perspective of the Global Agriculture and Food Security Program, GAFSP, that you've been able to help bring in all of our participants to essentially the world that GAFSP operates in. The speakers today have represented membership of the board of GAFSP in a way, starting from, you heard from Mr. Schatzsnyder at the beginning of the call as the chair. He's one of the donors from Germany. But the other panelists around the room are also active participants around our board table, the kind of groups that they represent, not the specific people, but the groups that they represent. And the voices that they've put on the table, I think, have been very critical in trying to outline that relationship between climate and food and the challenges that smallholders, which themselves are the largest group of private sector actors, but are critical in terms of helping to support this. Let me highlight a couple of takeaways that I heard from the session as well. One of the first things that really struck me was the characterization from our series summary that really talked about all of the forms of capital and the need to look at human, financial, social knowledge and to protect natural capital. A very good framework that I think each of the speakers has brought in different elements of it. When you look at social and the knowledge capital here, I think the issues in terms of women's empowerment are critical. On the knowledge side of things, though, as well as all panelists have spoke to, is that knowledge is not just about the innovation and the new, but as Madhur mentioned in terms of his call in his model, it's about the existing knowledge. It's about what is currently being done on the ground and giving the farmers the ability themselves to access extension, existing knowledge, and it's the traditional knowledge, what's actually happening and finding ways to support that. I think this notion of the large financing gap is a critical call to action. I think that's well complemented by the notion that the additional financing needed does need to come from more efficient use of existing resources as well, and to build from the experiences that we've heard around the table from Sierra Leone, where they've already started work on that, from what's happening in Bangladesh, where they've effectively used the GAFSP program to put in place programs to do that. So let me close by just thanking everybody for putting their voices on the table so coherently. And I think together, not only have we shown the need for some kind of policy consensus, but a policy consensus that really supports the whole system and changes that can happen across the whole system. So thank you. The continued evolution of the GAFSP program will be enriched by the kind of voices that we've heard at the table today. Thank you, Bettina.
Thank you, Catherine. We're now closing as we are a few minutes beyond schedule, but I think we did quite well, all considered. Just one final note on my part. What really inspired me about this particular side event at this year's CFS is the title of Building a New Policy Consensus with Smallholder Farmers as opposed to for smallholder farmers, which is a much more common thing to read and hear. And I think in this conversation, what we've heard is really the critical importance of having small-scale farmers, family farmers, women farmers actually present their agenda themselves, have their own voice, be at the table in shaping decisions about policy, about investment, about programming, how important, how indeed essential that is for success. So thank you once again to the organizers, to the presenters, to the panelists, and to all those who made also comments, remarks in the chat. Have a great rest of the day and enjoy the rest of the week at the CFS. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much, moderator Bettina. We also proud to have you as a very, very good moderator. Thanks once again. And my colleagues from the panel and also participants.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It means a lot. Thank you.